Hello, UCAR. Peter Christensen here, coming to you from the CEO's desk. I'm going to talk about it's a little bit of a repeat, but maybe I can explain it better. It's this language that's causing a lot of confusion right now, and it's actually, okay, maybe this is timely because it used to be in an addendum, and now the REPC has been updated. So recent update as of 2024, August something of 2024. The REPC has been updated. It's in section 4.3, and it's added a subsection E, real estate brokerage compensation. So it's basically the same idea as the real estate brokerage payment addendum, where it's asking the seller to agree to pay some of the buyer's brokerage fee. So buyer has hired an agent, is going to have an expense related to that service that they've engaged. And it's saying, hey, seller, would you help pay for this, right? It's kind of something that in the old system was handled through the MLS and through the listing brokerage commission, but now it's something that's handled separately. So we have the blanks there. So buyer's just basically saying, hey, seller, will you agree to pay X amount, X percentage, whichever, towards my brokerage fees, this expense that I'm going to incur in this transaction, right? Not a new concept, but now it's in the REPC. So the line that's throwing everyone for a loop is, it says this payment shall be made in addition to any other compensation agreed to by the seller's brokerage to buyer's brokerage, if applicable. Okay? So in addition, that's the language that's like freaking everyone out. Okay, so let's talk about it. Let's break it down into some hypotheticals. Now, before I go into hypotheticals, I'm using dollar amounts here just to make the math easy. Some people get cute and, use inanimate objects instead of dollars. This is not advocating for a certain dollar amount or structure. This is just simply an example so that hopefully it makes a little sense by using numbers, and we can go through. Okay, so let's say in the listing agreement, and this is all negotiable. I guess that's the point I was trying to make. This is all negotiable. This is not Peter advocating for a certain dollar amount. Okay, so let's say in the listing agreement in section 2.1, so this is the listing brokerage fee. They want $10, right? $10 is our fee. And they're saying, okay, 2.1. And then in 2.2, that's where it's the authorizing the listing brokerage to communicate that the seller and or brokerage are willing to pay a certain amount towards, potentially up to a certain amount towards buyer's brokerage fees. Okay, so hopefully you're familiar with that. Go watch the video, pause if you haven't, and then come back. Okay, in 2.2, let's say they also put, we're willing to consider paying up to $10 for a buyer's brokerage fee to contribute to the buyer, or I guess the buyer's brokerage, to offset that fee for the buyer. Okay, so we're clear here. So what would be the total, if both of those come true, what would be the total commission the seller, in essence, would be paying? Well, it's 10 plus 10, right? Those are two separate. They're not part of the same chunk anymore. They're two separate pots there. So $20 is kind of what the seller's saying. I'm guaranteeing to pay 10 to my listing brokerage in 2.1, and I'm offering 10, up to 10 to a buyer's brokerage, depending on the circumstance, what they're authorized to take, what the deal is. So potentially I'm willing to pay $20 in total commissions to my brokerage and to a buyer's brokerage. Okay. So let's say you get an offer, and in the REPC, in that section 4.3, the buyer is asking the seller to pay $10 towards their brokerage fees. the buyer's brokerage fees. Okay? And the seller accepts the REPC. How much are they going to be paying? Well, they're going to be paying the 10 in the listing agreement to their own brokerage, the listing brokerage. And then they've agreed through the REPC to pay the buyer's brokerage $10, right? And so $20. Okay? We're all good, right? Hopefully we're all good at this point. So let's say an offer comes in. So same setup, right? The $10 and $10 in the listing agreement. And let's say the buyer sends in a REPC, asking in the REPC in section 4.3E for the seller to pay $10 towards their brokerage fee. Okay? But the buyer's brokerage also sends over that real estate compensation agreement, brokerage compensation agreement. So that's a broker to broker ask. And they're also asking for $10. Okay? So you've got two different asks for compensation at this point, right? You have the REPC, which is the buyer asking the seller to pay $10 towards their buyer's brokerage compensation. And now you also have the buyer's brokerage asking the listing brokerage in that separate real estate brokerage compensation agreement. Okay, does that make sense? So you have two different asks there. Well, let's say the seller says, hey, I want to deal with it in the REPC. So they say yes to the REPC, accept the offer, but they instruct their listing brokerage, don't accept the offer or the ask from the buyer's brokerage in that real estate brokerage compensation agreement. So saying no to that one. How much have they agreed to pay? Okay, still the $10 to their listing brokerage, and then an additional $10 to the REPC, and then nothing else, right? Because they didn't agree to the broker-to-broker compensation, right? The listing brokerage didn't sign off on it because they know their seller's paying it through the REPC, and not to mention that the buyer's brokerage wasn't authorized to receive $20, 10 from the seller, 10 from the listing brokerage. So there we're having two different asks, but they're only saying yes to one. So that language, in addition to any agreed upon compensation from the listing brokerage to the buyer's brokerage, well, nothing was agreed upon. So it says if applicable, right? It's not applicable because they didn't agree to it in that broker-to-broker agreement. They only agreed to it in the listing agreement, in the REPC. So let's reverse that. Same scenario. Offer comes in the REPC asking for $10 to be contributed to the buyer's brokerage's commissions. And then also that compensation agreement, the brokerage compensation agreement comes in. That's the buyer's brokerage asking the listing brokerage. Well, let's say in that case, the seller says, yeah, I'd rather have it go through the listing brokerage. So we are going to counter with the REPC and take that out, but we'll agree to the listing brokerage compensating the buyer's brokerage, $10. So again, it's the same amount, $10 to the listing brokerage, $10 to the buyer's brokerage. This time it's not being paid from the seller to the buyer's brokerage. It's being paid from the listing brokerage to the buyer's brokerage because they're using that real estate brokerage compensation agreement, which is outside of the REPC. It's an agreement between the two brokerages. Okay? So they've rejected it in the REPC, countered, but they've agreed to it in the brokerage. Okay? So this is a lot. Hopefully you guys are charting this at home. Okay. Last scenario. Same thing. Listing agreement set up the same way, 10 and 10 in 2.1, 2.2. REPC comes in, 4.3, asks for the seller to pay buyer's brokerage $10. Okay? Also sent in from buyer's brokerage a real estate brokerage compensation agreement. So the broker-to-broker agreement asking for $10. Let's say they accept the REPC and they say yes to the broker-to-broker compensation agreement. How much compensation does the commission does the seller owe now? Now it's $30, right? Because it's 10 to their listing brokerage and 2.1. It's 10 through the REPC to the buyer's brokerage, and it's 10 from the listing brokerage to the buyer's brokerage, which gets added to their listing compensation, listing commission. So that's where the in addition to language comes into play in the REPC in 4.3E. That's if the seller were to agree in the REPC to pay a commission and the listing brokerage is agreeing to pay commission, then you have in addition to any additional payment being paid from the listing brokerage to the buyer's brokerage. So that's where it could be. And in this scenario, buyer's brokerage can't take that much. So they need to fix something. They need to cancel one of those because buyer's brokerage is only authorized in their buyer broker agreement to take $10. If you remember, we kind of set that up in the beginning, I think. So buyer's brokerage would be barred from accepting both sets of commission. Okay? And really, buyers should only be asking for one or the other. You know, could they split it up into 5 and 5? So ask $5 in the REPC, $5 through the brokerage compensation agreement. Yes, and then they're receiving the 10 from 2 different places, and they're only authorized to take 10, but they can do it. They could, in theory, do that. I don't know why you would do that. I don't know what advantage there is. It's going to cost the seller the same amount of money either way. So that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But that language is in there to allow for it to be split. So that's all it means. But it's not going to be a surprise. It should be something that the seller and listing brokerage are talking about. What are we paying? Should we accept it in the REPC or should we accept it in that brokerage compensation agreement? Not a lot of sense in doing both. You don't want to double up, so you wouldn't do both if it was if you were only meaning to pay one amount, not the other. So that in addition to language shouldn't be as scary as it maybe is being to some people, because it's in addition to any other agreements you guys have made with your listing brokerage to the buyer's brokerage. So it shouldn't be a surprise. Listing brokerage, through their fiduciary duties, should be in conversations with the seller explaining, hey, seller, we got this offer. Do you want us to agree to this compensation agreement from the buyer's brokerage, or do you want to agree to it in the REPC? It may only come in one channel and not the other, but you have that discussion so seller knows exactly what is expected of them as far as paying for commissions. So again, that language hopefully can get cleared up. It's not, it should never be a surprise to the seller. Should never be a surprise of, oops, we're paying double. Should always be known exactly what the seller is going to be paying through which channel, through the listing brokerage, going through that compensation agreement, brokerage compensation agreement, or through the REPC directly from seller to buyer's brokerage. Okay? I feel like I may have confused myself a little. Hopefully that was, maybe I need to chart it out. I don't know how to explain it any clearer than that. Hopefully using the examples helped. Put in the comments if I've just thoroughly confused you and I can reshoot this and try again. Remember, this is not legal advice. This is legal information only. If you need specific legal advice, please contact your attorney. Thanks for tuning in.